Okay. Hello, everyone. You're watching Speak Your Mind with Dr. Risa Ryger, our weekly series on the psychology of societal change. I'm Neza Alawi, the founder and CEO of Join Mayshad, the New York-based company that empowers women on a daily basis. I am here today with Dr. Risa Ryger, our clinical psychologist and investor in Mayshad. Hello, Risa.
Hi, Neza. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
So, first, I'd like to, after welcoming you and us saying our hellos together, I'd like to welcome our Mayshed Sisterhood. So happy you could join us today, either if you're here live right now or if you're watching at another point in time. And that one of the things that's very important is for you to know that no matter what time you tune in, no matter where you are, that your spot is always waiting for you. So here we are together. And so to talk a little bit just about today, Neza and I had a conversation, and this is kind of bringing you into the backdrop of today, which I think is really important, and that you never know what will happen when women start to talk together. And so, Neza, do you want to describe our conversation a little bit from here?
Sure. Well, definitely. Risa and I were talking about the biological clock that is on top of the head, I mean, of women. And we came to the conclusion that we really wanted to talk about womanhood, motherhood. Does it have to always have a correlation? Can we be strong women without choosing to be mothers? Do we have to be pregnant to be mothers? And so all the types of motherhoods that we can explore, and really deep diving into our womanhood. And we think that it's a subject that is not enough spoken about when we're talking about women's empowerment, and it's just critical. So in this show with Dr. Ryger, we like to really go into topics that are dear to our hearts as women, and to dare speak what others won't just speak about, and to make you feel comfortable to join us at any time to ask the questions, but also to have the answers and solution to help you move forward.
That's a great place for us to continue on from here. And that it really brings us to fundamental questions of how womanhood is defined. And how do we think of ourselves? How do we think of ourselves in a whole way? And before we even go into this on a deeper level, in this conversation, we're going to talk about things that aren't easy to talk about, and that we're going to be looking at some fundamentals here and really questioning from the ground up what this means, what womanhood means, and what it means now. And that really, are we in a 4.0 of being able to redefine, to update for ourselves, and for not only for ourselves but for how we think about the women around us. Because as sometimes we can be very difficult with ourselves and very critical of ourselves, that our thoughts about others can also come in very, very quickly. And something else for us to take into consideration. And so at this point in time, given that there are more options, we are talking about motherhood, womanhood, and the clicking tock and the ticking clock, pardon me, and expanding our options. Our options not only in terms of motherhood, but our options also in terms of womanhood.
Dr. Ryger, fabulous. I loved when you talked about the 4.0 version. And it's true that the evolution of women, and we know how societal change doesn't happen overnight. And the psychology, as a matter of fact, I mean, you can change laws and create space, but the psychology is the slower one to follow. And so we had layers of women's empowerment, and it started in the 60s with the first movement of feminism, and then women wanting to go to work and have more freedom, and have freedom to have a child, not have it. And so that was the first layer. And then there was an evolution, and then there was the hashtag Me Too movement that came, and it is just such an interesting time with this everything that we've gone through in 2020. I think to go to that new layer and stronger version for women is interesting. So talking about this is interesting in terms of timing. So the symbolic nature of the clock with the passing of time, especially if it's an alarm clock, there's a sense of urgency. When we think of the metaphorical alarm clock applied to women's reproductive systems, why has it been, Dr. Ryger, that the ticking of the clock has been so ingrained into our psyches?
As we're sitting here now, I'm thinking about how we're women who literally come from women in some way, shape, or form, whether it's our biological mother or not our biological mother, but that in some way that we're women who come from women. And whether it's IVF or any other options, but the option that is non-negotiable, even at this point, is that we're women who literally come out of other women. And so there's something, profoundly both perhaps intuitive in some respects and also compelling in making choices. And so there's the choice of a kind of a continuity. And that doesn't mean that continuity is right, because there's no right here. So let's start with that this is a discussion in which there's no right. And so if there's no right, there's also, by corollary, there's also no wrong. And this is the beauty and the difficulty of this discussion simultaneously, because oftentimes it's so much easier when there's a right and a wrong. And so, being who you are, you're going to go one way, you're going to go another way. But this is a different place where there isn't a right and a wrong, and that the decisions here are so profoundly personal and can be so fundamentally important to who you are and how you define yourself. So that as women who come from women, right, if we're choosing to not do that, we're severing in a piece of continuity. And I'm talking about in a very specific kind of way, and we're going to broaden this topic as well. But we can make different kinds of choices, but those choices also mean that we need to rethink how we identify ourselves, how we define ourselves, how different sorts of what we've heard growing up, what we've heard about women, kind of the idea of, well, just because you have a uterus does it mean that you have to use it, or do you only not use it because it's not, working in the way that is usable, and so how do we evolve for ourselves and our assumptions and our thoughts about other women as well?
Dr. Ryger, I speak with you, and I love this conversation because it's always with these very talented women on so many aspects, but then you always remind me that you also have the professional psychological aspect of things. And in what you said, and it's true, it's not just, it doesn't come from us making a choice, is that we were pre-wired from many generations, from women coming from a woman to another one, to have a continuity. So there is that sense of disruption that comes with that fear of, I do not feel comfortable to have a child in my life and be a mother of a child at home, even though I can be very generous and I am the mothers of next generation, as all women are. But am I ready to create that this linear disruption? There is another part, Dr. Ryger. Uh, the, the eye of society on that woman who chooses to not be a mother at home, that comes with a lot of, I would say, negative thoughts, that, oh, there must be a reason, something is wrong with her health, something is wrong with her psychology, or so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, there are many possibilities here. And so one of the latest options that needs to become more of an option in terms of our thinking is that someone can actually choose not to have their own child or choose not to have a child to parent in their own home. And that this is an option that's there as well. And so oftentimes, I mean, if we really go back and we're honest about what are the assumptions, if we hear a woman who doesn't have children, that we can think, oh gosh, there must be something wrong. She must not have been able to. There's a biological problem there. And that in our list of the multiple choice items, that this is oftentimes the idea that someone is choosing not to. And then if there's the basic ideas about what women are about, and I talk about women and in terms of the 4 F's, right? And they're the finders, the feelers, the fixers, and the freelancers, right? And so when we talk about that, and we talk about a woman who is choosing not to have a child, what is the kind of language that we have for that? What is the language that we have that makes not raising a child? I'm not talking about not having impact on a child, not being nurturing, not any of the other options, but just the choice of not having a child in your home that you're raising, right? That is not often an option that we think of in terms of the options. We certainly have options if we hear about someone who's having trouble getting pregnant, that we can say, well, have you tried IVF? Have you thought about adoption? But we don't necessarily think about, can you choose just to not? As a choice that is absolutely a choice.
Well, and I know a lot of couples that have been together for over 20 years and happily together and have chosen to not have a child at home. And very talented, generous, again, have an amazing social life. Their godparents, nephew, uncles, aunts, but have chosen to not have that responsibility at home. So yes, so we need to all take our minds out of those preset thinking when it comes to seeing others who do not have children. Now, when it comes to choosing to have a child, and a woman who is trying to have a child and it doesn't happen, so there are sometimes some clinical reasons of why that a gynecologist is going to help her solves, but there is also a psychological aspect. And sometimes she has a fear towards becoming a mom because she might think that she wouldn't be a good mom. Have you ever faced that type of situation?
Absolutely. That being a mom is massive. I mean, you can be in a relationship, you can have a spouse, you can have a life partner, you can end a relationship, but being a parent is forever, forever. And that's how it is. And so it is daunting. It's absolutely daunting. I mean, if we think about it from more of a perspective, right? It's absolutely daunting that, our kids don't come with guidebooks. We have to figure stuff out. Even if you've babysat, or you've had younger siblings, it's a whole other ball game when you've got your baby that you're struggling to get into their car seat to take them home from the hospital. And all of a sudden you think, I can barely get this like beautiful little person into this car seat. Oh my gosh, how am I going to manage the rest of this? And it's a massive undertaking, but just like everything else, it doesn't happen all at once. But the responsibility is huge, and that can be paralyzing, easily so. And so it's something that we can grow with and and evolve with as we become parents. But becoming a parent, when you really think about it, it's massive. It's wonderful. It's an extraordinary journey. It's Mr. Toad's wild ride. Uh, but it's also daunting. So to be fearful is completely understandable, and that doesn't have to stop you, but to acknowledge that you feel afraid of it, that makes a great deal of sense. When we do things where we take on an enormous amount of responsibility, and we're serious about the responsibility that we take on, there is a fearfulness. And it's not a negative fearfulness. It can be a fearfulness that keeps us on a healthy alert, a healthy questioning, a healthy introspection and exploration.
I would like to free all women that are listening to us today and that still feel consciously or unconsciously that there is a clock ticking on top of their head, that you have the right to become a mother at any age, just as a man. And those options are not just, well, first of all, science has evolved a lot that gives us much more time to be pregnant, but adopting a child. And I would like to share our own personal experience as mothers. Dr. Ryger, you have two daughters that
Yes.
are older than mine, and I have two daughters too that are turning 11 and 13. And I chose to have them at a young age because I wanted them to deal with all my imperfections as I was still growing up myself. And it was a very fun journey. But I also knew a little after having the second one, they were very young. When I started my Meshat journey of building myself, the company, the nonprofit, and really digging into this women's empowerment advocacy, I just wanted to scream to everyone that there is no difference of carrying a child and that child being yours, or adopting a child and that child being fully yours. And as a matter of fact, there is a sort of little, to a certain extent, narcissistic loves that comes with a child that comes from your own genes, because you feel that that child, like has your hair or has your eyes or has, but there is nothing more beautiful than that unconditional love of loving a child that doesn't have your genes, and to whom you that you fill up with all your values and your thoughts and the responsibility, and you still feel that you are the mother of that child, because and you chose that child. And I feel that to even to the ones that had troubles explaining to the child that it was an adopted child, I always said that I would brag to the child, like, you're lucky. I mean, like, I didn't have you. I chose you. You're like even more loved than if I just had you and I had to be your mother. I chose you for the amazing being that you are, and we are in this journey together. I would love women to get to that mindset where they're really freeing themselves and feeling and understanding what motherhood is. Could you share with us, Dr. Ryger, your personal feeling on motherhood?
Well, motherhood is so profoundly personal and can have so much meaning. And in the people that I've worked with, there have been people who've had fertility issues and people who have not had fertility issues. And the thing is that for the most part, if you want to be a parent, you can become a parent. If you want to be a parent, you can become a parent. That doesn't mean that you're having a pregnancy. And so there's a dividing line between having a pregnancy and being a parent. And that there are people who, for all sorts of reasons, are not having pregnancies. But that doesn't mean that your road has ended, if that's the road that you want to be on. There are so many different ways and so many different ways to adopt. And also, if we expand our ideas about adoption. So with one piece, you're talking about how this child is not going to have your genetic material. Well, I'll just say that sometimes that's not such a bad thing, you know, and that there are people who have different types of genetic disorders and whatever, and they decide that they're really going to go on an adoption route, and that there are people who want to adopt and choose adoption independent of their own fertility status, because that's where their hearts are. They feel that that's the road that they want to travel. And so when we expand our views, when we expand our options, when we open our view to encompass really what the possibilities are, and we sort through that and ask ourselves tough questions like, well, what is it that I would feel I'm missing out on? What is it that would be hurtful to me? What is it that could be really positive for me? And that we really work through different aspects of our self-definition, and that we sort through again, is this what we really think? Or is this something that we've heard so much about, or that's been more kind of infused us, that we're not even sure anymore if that's really more of what we've heard versus more of really what we want and what we feel would be wonderful options for ourselves. And so there's a deep questioning of, is my self-definition in this way, is it tight? Is there room for expansion? And again, there isn't a right or wrong with this. It's most important to really be in connection with yourself and in deep understanding. Because these are decisions. I mean, once you become a parent, as I said, parenting is forever. And that even questioning or not questioning having a child, that's another question for you to have. Is that really who you are and what you want? And so we have these opportunities to go into ourselves profoundly, deeply, rethink, give ourselves the space and the gift. I mean, to give ourselves the gift of rethinking and exploring and really being sure we're not holding on to somebody else's view of what we should do, of how we should conduct our lives, what are the decisions that we should make in our own lives. But to come to a place of really feeling that this is my decision for who I am, that is a courageous spot to go to.
Can we say that the relationship to parenthood in general, and most importantly, motherhood. It's the relationship from mentor to mentee, and if we feel that having a child is about just about that piece of, oh, we're responsible of that child, we're giving them a home, we're giving them education, we're giving them this, and we miss on that important part, is that you are the mentor of that child. We would be missing a lot on the essence of motherhood. And for those who are not mothers at home, what are the multiple ways for them to be mothers of next generation of others around them?
But just before I answer this, I just want to say that there are also women who aren't sure. And so one of the options now is to have your eggs frozen. And so if you're in the midst of not being clear, feeling that this isn't the time for you, and having fertility concerns down the road, that this is also an option that women have and a choice that they can make. And it's not necessarily a choice of whether or not you want to be a parent, but it's a choice of whether or not you want to have an option. And so there's another option, which is to also not choose for right now and not even be certain about it for now, but to say, well, I might, and I'm not sure, and I want to give myself this option. Very, very important. And also going back to your question, Neza, and your thinking, which really brings us into how thinking can become more expansive. I mean, as we think about like some of the mindfulness world about expansiveness and even the space that we have between our in-breath and our out-breath, that we may have more spaciousness in us. We may not be as constricted as we may feel. And so, what are the options for being a nurturing person? I mean, I have friends who chose and did not have children, and they are nurturing and and nurturing, giving. And I'm saying this, I know it might sound a little bit icky, but I'm saying it specifically because oftentimes there's an assumption that this person would be cold, or this person isn't nurturing, or this person is just something, but that there's a negativity, surrounding it. And that with men, I don't know that if there's a man who didn't have a child, that the same discussion would be happening in that way. Would we say, oh, that this is a man who isn't nurturing, this is a man who's selfish, this is a man who's self-absorbed, can't even put themselves aside enough to become a parent. I mean, when we think about the language that we have available to us and the different categories of language, that's more gender oriented, it's really quite astonishing how women get it from both sides. Because even if someone becomes a mother, right, as you did, as I have, we also have the not stay at home mom component to it, right? And that, well, I'm not with my children all the time. I'm not a stay-at-home mom. I'm a working mom. And so is that another aspect? And we talked about this a little bit, and I'd love other people's thoughts on this, right? That, so that not only is it, well, if you're not becoming a mom, it's because, there was a problem, but that if you're a working mom, it means that you had to, that somehow there wasn't enough, financial stability at home. And so the reason why you are now working is because of finances. Now we know that households now that we really have to have two incomes. The cost of life, just go to the supermarket if you can, or have it put in your car, pick it up curbside. But the cost of just like going and putting a meal together is really pretty, can take your breath away. But that there can be something more than necessity that has women who are moms also working, that you can have drive, you can have ambition, you can have feelings that you can contribute to the world, that there's a sense of self-efficacy, that you're doing something that's important to you, just as women who are at home. And women who are at home can get a bad rap also. That they're not really engaged in this way. They're not go-getters. They don't have ambition in this kind of way. I mean, so that really one of the things that becomes so clear is that there isn't easily a spot for a woman to be right. There are many, many spots for women to be wrong, but there are very few spots, and I don't even know what they are actually, except for the ones that we create inside ourselves, where a woman is right.
Well, there is a lot of guilt that comes with being a woman and growing up in society, but even more with being a mother. And I remember feeling guilty when my children would get sick. And so I've been working on that guilt a lot to free myself, and so I've seen a little bit of that, the guilt that the surrounding the family can unconsciously put on you, on, oh, the grandma, seeing the child that has fever, she got a flu, and she's like looking at you, and I'm talking about my mom or my mother-in-law, and it's just like, okay, I'm the responsible criminal who was at work and not here when the child, or I'm the one who didn't cover up the child, or and so yeah, so definitely when everything is right, it's like the child is great, and it's a great child, it's like great parents. But when something goes wrong with the child, it's definitely the mother that we point out first. So guilt in that matter, guilt of working a lot, guilt facing again the let's talk about the bullying moms in schools. I mean, like when you get to the school system, it's like suddenly, it's like you're judged by other women. And so yes, all those feelings that come with motherhood and that women now in 2020 should definitely get rid of, and understand that they can be great moms while not necessarily being the most involved in school activities or other.
Well, I was telling you before we went on camera. There are some people who are great bakers. I am not a baker, but in addition to that, I have my practice. I've had my practice and my consulting, and so I really just didn't. When it came push to shove, and there was a particular situation, I just couldn't bake cookies from scratch with my kids, and they needed to bring cookies in for something. And so I went to the supermarket and I bought one of those, kind of like slice and bake things. And we sliced them, and that was baking cookies with mom. We sliced them, we did roll them out, and I did have cookie cutters so that we could, cut them into the cute little shapes. But I didn't start with flour and eggs and butter, but that was the best that I could do. And then we'd bake them and we could decorate them and do that afterwards. But there are the things that you just can't, you can't do everything, and you can't be everywhere. And so and even for stay-at-home moms, if you have more than one kid, you can't do everything and you can't be everywhere. And so, but I think this is going down to like fundamental aspects about women and the kinds of notions, the notions of this kind of perfectionism, right? And that somehow, whatever it is that we're taking on, it means that there's something else that we're not taking on. So therefore, we're less than. I mean, if we start this equation, right? If we start this math, like a little bit of a math equation, right? If we're doing this, it means that we're not doing that. So it already means that we're less than. And so this idea that we should be a this and a that and the other thing and the other thing and the other thing, and that simultaneously we're doing it all. And as I went to one of my kids' soccer tournaments, and I saw there was this mom who had these beautiful caramel apples that had like little toppings stuck on it, and this gorgeous box and everything with the paper lined on it. You know when there's the paper lining in the box also. And I went over to her and I said, "Excuse me, those apples are so beautiful. Where did you buy them?" And she looked at me like I had 8 heads and said, "Well, I made them." And I thought to myself, I mean, my first response was like, "Ugh, I didn't make caramel apples." But then I thought about it, I said, this is probably not going to happen. And I'm going to need to find my own really good spot to buy caramel apples. And so there's always the something.
Yeah.
There's always the something. And the kicker for us as women is that we live in this bizarre kind of duality where we say the word perfect and we talk about perfectionism. At the same time, we also know that it doesn't exist. We also know, how many times do we tell our kids nothing's perfect, no one's perfect, but the really the dirty little secret is that we still may hold that up for ourselves. God, I didn't do that perfectly. And so it's this bizarre no-win spot. It can be this bizarre no-win spot that we hold this ideal of perfect, and we also know that nothing is. What do you think, Nessa?
Yes, and that's a great story about your intuitive questions, like where did you buy them? And then her saying, "Oh no, I made them." And if I was there with you, I would say, "Well, then you have a business opportunity in your hands." so, so it's just, like our mind that is more set up to, well, if you can bake something like that, then open your own store. Don't waste that. So yes, the concept of this notion of perfection. I tell my daughters, I am not a great mom, but God, I am not a perfect mom, but God, I am a great mom, because I just know that in every step of their life, I've been there. I've been pushing them forward. I've been treating them with that notion of, I want to teach them how to be independent, emotionally independent. And I remember putting my 2 years old and taking the pants and teaching her how to put her feet in the pants and put her pants up, and being like, "Mommy's here. I'm here. You can do it. You can do it." So does that mean that I do not want to go and like swipe up her pants, which is like easier for me because it would have taken a minute versus 15 minutes of focusing one leg and the other. But I always wanted them to understand that they can do things without me when they could, and mom is always there to back you up. I'm there to put the limits because you need that authority, and I'm there to give you direction. But it's not, and some topics, for instance, school, and I would tell my daughters, you are responsible of your school. Mommy goes to work, I'm responsible of my work, and so many other things. You're responsible of one thing, your health. So please, when I'm dressing you up to go in a certain way to school, do not overexpose yourself to cold and other things. And and your school. And I never wanted to play the game of being that mom that does the homework with my kids. I wanted them to understand that they come back from school, that they take that 1 hour to do their homework, and then they come and join me and we read together. We talk about existential topics together. But I do want it. I do not just want to go through multiplications with them and spend 2 hours with them. Yet they always had the support. I mean, if they if they were struggling with something, they would come to me, but I just didn't want to be policing them. And so those are little things that we kind of fall in as moms, especially the ones that have a lot of time. And it becomes a toxic relationship because you become a slave of that relationship, but also you get to a point where you do not let your children grow out of it, because you've been doing this for the past 10 years. It started becoming your existence. And what happens when they need to go? When they need to go to college, when they're more independent in high school, what do? Do you start manipulating their way to stay around you?
Well, Nessa, when you get to that point, I'll send you my article about preparing your children for college, which I call Taking Down the Scaffolding. Okay, because as parents, we put scaffolding around our children, and then we need to start taking down the scaffolding. But
Yeah.
you're a couple of years down the road. But if anybody wants that article, let me know. Dr. R at expertinchange.com. Happy to send you the article. But one of the things that you do and did, and is also crucially important for for women who mentor, sponsor, our aunts and our aunts and godparents and second moms, or friends, for sometimes when our kids can't talk to us about something and they just want another adult, that thankfully we have a friend or a relative who they can go to, is that what we do, and as a mentor, as a sponsor, as someone who cares about another human being, is that we hold in our minds the vision, the picture of our child, our niece, our nephew, our co-worker, our colleague, who we feel can move along. We hold a picture of them in our minds of their being able to do it. And this is a function, another speak your mind, of mirror neurons, of that we have a picture of this person being able to do it, and it's through our picture and our belief in it. If we're talking realistically, look, we're not going to think that a 4-year-old is going to, I don't know, fully loaded dishwasher with sharp glasses and knives and whatever, but that within reason, within what's developmentally appropriate and reasonable, that we hold the image for our children, for the people that we love, that they can do. We may need to break it down to little steps, right? Like maybe your little sweetheart could get one foot in and maybe the other foot in, but needed mommy to help pull up the pants, right? So it's not, well, here are the pair of pants, kids. Kid, like, have a party. I'll see you when I get back. I mean, but that we support step by step the attainment of this, keeping in mind, that we also see the individual. It's not just our picture of them, but things that are reasonable, that we hold in our mind, that this is a can do for them, and that through our real belief in that and seeing it, that they feel that from us. That's also part of amazing leadership, right? Because parenting in its own way is also a form of leadership. And so as a woman, if you're in your work and you're a leader, and that you picture your group doing this, you picture this vision, you picture that the person, The woman who may not be speaking up so much at the meetings is going to be speaking up, and you support and you nurture that. It's partially from that space inside of you that the inside of them in their brains literally like connects with you and can share that image while they're in transition and in growth. And this is something that, whether it's your child, an interaction with your neighbor's child, you're sponsoring, you're adopting, you're being a friend, you're being that person that your kid can call them, you know, when they're not having their best moment with you, just to get perspective and to be heard, whatever that may be. But that inside ourselves as women, right, that we can hold on to a picture of someone else and help them grow.
It's that mentorship. I agree, Dr. Ryger. And you know what's funny is that it's true that other children will trust more an imperfect mom to open up to her because they can relate much more to her as being such a cool and great mom than the one that is more formal. And yes, you do want to build a ground of communication with your children because it goes in phases, and some parents can be amazing toddlers parents but can just fail it at adolescence if they still want to stay over the kids the same way. And then so there is also a lot of humility, and I think it's the same with mentorship, because whether you're mentoring someone from a certain social background or another one, or from a gender to another one, you understand that you just cannot be the same mentor to everyone. Your style stays the same, but you also need to adapt to the way of learning that differs, you know, depending on the cultures and the personalities. So of course our audience is very excited about this topic, and so we have a few questions here. Dr. Ryger, could you talk to us about how motherhood isn't an universal experience and is complicated by our socio-economic status and by our race? How can white women become more aware that their mothering experiences are not the universal experience?
What a great question that is. The first step in doing that is acknowledging it. That's step one. That step one is acknowledging it, that it is not a universal experience, and that at the get-go, what our children may have their doors open for and not so much open for is different. I mean, one of the things that I've seen is, and I'm sure that you've seen it in some way, shape, or form, are the conversations that people of color and moms of color are having with their children, in helping them to understand what it is that they may be confronted with, and having this conversation that a Caucasian mom, a white mom, is not going to have with her child. It's just very, very different. And the part that's important is that as you are experiencing that having an understanding, becoming more aware, and then being able to help your child granularly, like in their air, through their pores, understand is that people aren't better or worse as a function of the amount of pigment that they have in their skin.
Thank you. There is another question. How do you feel about the risk of reproductive technologies? Sorry, I jumped. Yes. How do you feel about the risk of reproductive technologies to produce biological children when there are so many kids out there in the foster care system who need good families?
Well, that's a tough question. And again, it's really a very personal question. And one of the things that we're talking about, and hopefully this show will help people, is to whoever it is who wrote that question, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us, is that it becomes part of the options that people have and the choices that are available, and that fostering can be one of the choices in the choices available as a viable choice. And as we think about, having your own child, adopting, choosing to not raise a child, that fostering a child, being a foster parent is another fantastic option and an important and crucial option that's available. And so it needs to be part of what options look like and just become part of the general conversation of options.
Yes, I really hope that with this show we did open up that perspective to people. But definitely, as you said, if they're not ready to do it with a full heart, open heart to do it, then it's better to go for the biological techniques.
Neza, you mentioned, and we didn't even get into that today, but really also the cultural component of motherhood and womanhood. And I think that we're going to need to save that for another time. But I didn't want that to go unnoticed because I think that that's also really very, very important culturally, depending on your parental background, where you've grown up, and where your grandparents are from or what you heard about it, that this is also a very important piece of our perceptions and our definitions and even maybe our unconscious aspects of what womanhood, what motherhood may mean.
Yes, no, I would love to answer that question before we finish and to talk about it. It not only there is a tremendous pressure with for women to become a mother, but on top of it, if you choose to be a couple in a couple and married, then everyone is judging you in certain cultures. I don't know if everywhere, but definitely in my culture, the first thing is like after the first, they give them like a 6 month to 12 month of peace, and then if the woman is not pregnant, then is that question that all the great aunts and the mothers and the will keep asking, and that puts even more pressure on the couple who's trying to get pregnant, and not even to talk about the couple that doesn't want to get pregnant because it's not even an option. And another point is the gender of the baby. And so it gets to limit. We had that woman that was working in our household, and definitely that came from a poor family and had 3 daughters, and she was pregnant again. And my mom would tell her, do you understand that you're dividing whatever wealth you have in between those children? Instead of having one and educating them properly, you're having three, you're adding a fourth one you cannot afford. And she was just saying how it is so important, and hopefully it's going to be a boy because she had 3 daughters, and if she doesn't get a boy, it's the end of her couple. Like if it was a royal heir, or that they had this trust with billions of dollars that someone had to run. So the pressure is just terrible, to see how it was important to have a boy and still is in certain families and even poor families.
And what's fascinating about that is that it would be the assumption that it's the woman's fault, right? That she couldn't produce a male. which is of course the Bentley of children, and but that in fact it's the men who determine what the gender is going to be.
But even if scientifically we know it, trust me, it's still in the head of people. It's the women's fault.
Incredible that no matter what, it's like, it's like water will find a path, and that it's like that no matter how convoluted it has to be, whether it goes up mountains and goes down hills or whatever else, that it'll be her fault. that it'll be her. It's just extraordinary. But even if that's what the assumption is, we don't have to have ownership, and we really have to be alert, aware, careful, and discerning about what we're willing to allow in and what we really need to not allow in and not take ownership of, and to make those really important decisions for ourselves.
Dr. Ryger, we're getting to the end of our show. Can you leave us with the conclusion to all the women that are listening to us today?
Yes. In one simple yes, which is that the conclusion of today is think about your options. And even when you've thought about options, there could be even more options. And so to allow yourself and to give yourself the gift of not staying stuck in your spot, even if that's where you decide you want to end up in, but to allow yourself the gift of exploration, of deep internal questioning, of making sure that what seems right to you is really who you are and what's inside of you. And that's what I would say. When you think that maybe you've looked at all the options, think again. There may be another option that you haven't considered. And as we're ending up today, I know you're going to do the final goodbye. That what I say is that whether you have sisters or a sister, or whether you don't have a sister, that this is a sisterhood, and this is a place where you're always welcome. You always have a spot, and I'm so thankful and that you were here today or watching this at some other point to join us.
Thank you, Dr. Ryger. Yes, to everyone, you can find us at joinmayshat.com, and there is something happening every day, from workshops to shows to brain trust session, a lot of conversation, digital events, live events. As a matter of fact, next week we're going to do our first summer live event in Central Park. So please visit joinmayshat.com and stay tuned with us.